A black, single father offered shelter to a stranded young woman for just one night, never imagining she was the daughter of a millionaire. "You really believed you could take advantage of my daughter and walk away unscathed?" Robert Sterling's voice was ice cold as it came through the receiver. David Miller, hands trembling, held the phone tightly. "I'm going to ruin you and your pathetic excuse for a family." At 34, David worked night shifts as a nurse. He never imagined that one act of kindness would spiral into the worst ordeal of his life. 3 weeks earlier, during a violent storm, he had come across a young woman, soaked, shivering, and clearly terrified, alone on the street. Without hesitation, he brought her into the modest home he shared with his 7-year-old daughter, Chloe. She had introduced herself as Emily Carter, a college student who had lost both her wallet and phone. For 2 weeks, she lived under David's roof like part of the family, helping around the house, bonding with Chloe, and bringing warmth into their lives. David had no idea that Emily was actually Sophia Sterling, heir to a $200 million real estate empire. "Daddy, who's yelling on the phone?" Chloe asked, padding into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. David forced a smile as he ended the call, but inside his pulse raced. Robert Sterling's threats weren't vague. They were razor sharp. Accusations of kidnapping, threats to end his nursing career, and warnings of losing custody of Chloe. What Sterling didn't know was that David had documented every moment of Sophia's stay, not out of suspicion, but because his work in healthcare had instilled in him a habit of thorough documentation. Every interaction, every tearful thank you, every smile exchanged between Sophia and Chloe, it was all saved, cataloged, and dated. When Sophia left with nothing but a handwritten thank you note, David never imagined that 3 days later, his world would implode. The first sign came when he was summoned to the hospital boardroom. "We received an anonymous complaint about inappropriate conduct outside of work," his supervisor said, avoiding eye contact. Later, David watched silently as a security officer combed through his apartment with a court order. Chloe clung to his leg, confused and scared. He gently stroked her hair and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Some very powerful people are about to realize they picked the wrong man to underestimate." If this story of injustice has caught your attention, make sure you subscribe, because what's coming will show you just how far the truth can go when one man refuses to be broken. Robert Sterling's retaliation escalated quickly. The next day, Chloe's school informed David that her tuition had been frozen due to ongoing legal matters. Soon after, his health insurance was revoked, his bank accounts were flagged, and even his modest apartment loan was suddenly called into review. "Daddy, why did the lady at school say I can't eat lunch anymore?" Chloe asked from the back seat as he drove her home. Her innocent voice carried fear he had hoped she would never feel. Not because of a mistake he made, but because of a kindness he showed. David wrapped his arms around her at a stoplight, his heart burning with helpless anger. Sterling wasn't simply out for revenge. He was deploying his wealth like a weapon, dismantling every part of David's life. At 2 a.m., the next call came. "See how easily I can unravel your little life," Sterling sneered. "Tomorrow, I'll cancel your contracts. By next week, you'll be homeless. And this is just the beginning." But Sterling didn't know who he was dealing with. David had been raised in the foster system, shuffled between orphanages since the age of 5. He knew exactly what it felt like to be judged, abandoned, and dismissed, especially as a black man without a pedigree. He had learned long ago to survive where others collapsed. "My father built an empire from nothing," Sterling said with smug superiority. "You're just another parasite trying to grab what isn't yours. Sophia was vulnerable, and you exploited her." David didn't interrupt. He let the man expose every layer of entitlement and racism that fueled his threats. What Sterling didn't know was that the entire conversation was being recorded, captured discreetly by an app David had downloaded after the first threat. Years in hospital environments had taught him one thing: documentation saves lives. "People like you, Sterling," David said at last, "need a reminder of where you actually stand in this world. You think you can play house with a Sterling? My daughter's worth more than you'll ever earn in 10 lifetimes." The next morning, a knock came at the door. It was Dr. Evelyn Reed, a civil rights attorney David had once worked with during a discrimination case at the hospital. "I've heard rumors," she said as she stepped inside without waiting. Robert Sterling has a long history of using lawsuits and intimidation to scare off anyone he deems beneath his family. She looked him in the eye. And you're not the first target. 3 years ago, Robert Sterling financially destroyed a young schoolteacher who had dared fall in love with his niece. 2 years before that, he annihilated the career of an artist his eldest daughter had met in Paris. This is his pattern, Evelyn said, laying out a series of files across David's coffee table. Threats, financial suffocation, legal intimidation. He keeps turning up the pressure until his targets disappear. And it always works, David added, his eyes scanning the documents, because the people he targets don't have the means to fight back. From across the room, Chloe played silently, but it was clear she could sense the unease in the air. Something shifted in David's expression. Not fear, not despair, but a cold resolve that Evelyn immediately recognized. He has no idea who he's up against, David muttered, a flicker of quiet defiance burning behind his eyes. People like Sterling live in bubbles so thick with privilege, they forget there's power in places they've never looked. Like survival. Like truth. As Robert Sterling privately reveled in what he assumed was yet another effortless takedown of a man beneath him, David quietly opened a folder on his computer. Inside, 2 years' worth of precise documentation, every moment Sophia spent under his roof, every tearful thank you, every moment of authentic connection with Chloe. A reality far removed from the warped narrative her billionaire father had constructed to protect his ego. Each threat Sterling delivered only sharpened David's focus. Every attempt to crush him simply ignited a deeper resolve. What Sterling didn't see was that the very injustice he wielded so freely was fueling the creation of something that could unravel everything he had built. For the next 3 days, David and Evelyn worked around the clock from her tiny apartment, which they had transformed into a command center. By day, David kept up appearances. By night, they reviewed audio recordings, cross-checked files, and traced Sterling's digital footprints. Every lie, every call, every veiled threat. "Take a look at this," Evelyn said one night, eyes fixed on the laptop screen. Sterling's used identical tactics in at least 4 previous cases over the past 5 years. Same formula: economic isolation, legal pressure, then relentless harassment. The picture was becoming clearer and darker. Robert Sterling wasn't simply an overbearing father. He was a predator who used wealth and fear as weapons, systematically dismantling the lives of anyone he deemed unworthy of his family name. Every one of his victims was silenced, Evelyn continued. Multi-million-dollar settlements, sealed by airtight NDAs. But this time he slipped. David nodded grimly as he played back another recording. He assumed I'd fold like the others, that I wouldn't fight, but the campaign against him intensified. The next morning, David found his professional license under sudden review for an undisclosed ethics complaint. His bank account was frozen for suspected fraud. His landlord received a mysterious phone call labeling him as a security risk. "Daddy, why were those men taking pictures of our house?" Chloe asked, clinging to his leg. David had noticed the plainclothes investigators hovering around their block, snapping photos, logging details, tracking visitors. But what Sterling didn't realize was that David was no stranger to hostile systems. He wasn't just a nurse. He was a survivor of the foster care system, a product of institutions where paperwork could mean the difference between safety and suffering. Years of navigating bureaucracy had turned meticulous documentation into second nature. "He's trying to break me financially before launching legal action," David explained to Evelyn during a late-night strategy meeting. "But what he doesn't know is that he's documenting his own downfall. Every threat, every move, it's all evidence." Evelyn leaned back, impressed. "David, we have enough for criminal charges and a civil case that could cost him tens of millions." Then everything changed. David received a phone call from Sophia. It was the first time she had contacted him since leaving. Her voice was shaky, raw. "David, I need to talk. My father's saying awful things about you, about Chloe. He's planning something terrible." She hesitated, clearly struggling. "He's hired people to plant evidence. In your home, he's going to frame you for kidnapping, and worse." David's chest tightened, but his voice stayed level. "Sophia, where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm hiding in his office," she whispered. "I overheard a call. He's already setting everything in motion. You need to get out. Take Chloe and go." Please. Evelyn, listening on speakerphone, silently pressed the record button again. She nodded at David. This was the break they needed. Sophia, don't do anything risky, David said. But if you can collect proof, recordings, documents, I already have, she whispered. For weeks, voice memos, emails, messages. My father. He's not just cruel, he's dangerous, and I've seen him destroy lives. Before she could say more, the call cut out. But in that moment, the tide turned. This wasn't just about protecting a reputation anymore. This was war. Now, it wasn't just David and Evelyn against a billionaire. They had someone on the inside. Sophia, a witness with direct access to Robert Sterling's strategies and secrets. That night, for the first time in days, David tucked Chloe into bed with a calm she hadn't seen in him since everything began. You look different today, Daddy, she said, noticing the softness in his expression. He kissed her forehead gently. Sometimes, sweetheart, when very bad people try to hurt the good ones, they end up destroying themselves, and Daddy, he's just waiting for that to happen. In the kitchen, Evelyn moved through piles of evidence like a seasoned strategist, her focus razor sharp. Do you realize what we've built here? She said, gesturing to the stacks of documents and digital files. This isn't just a harassment case anymore. It's a full-blown conspiracy, extortion, corruption, abuse of power. If this goes to trial, Sterling could face serious criminal charges. David nodded, his gaze steady, but beneath it was something deeper, a lifetime's worth of clarity. Evelyn, people like Sterling have underestimated me my entire life. Teachers, supervisors, the system, they saw a young black man with no pedigree and assumed I had no future. But I learned a long time ago, the best way to win isn't through rage. It's by letting people expose who they really are. And Sterling, he's showing the world exactly what he's made of. Evelyn gave a knowing smile, one of admiration and shared purpose. As they were finishing the night's preparations, David's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He read it, then silently handed the phone to Evelyn. It was from Sophia. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., he's sending men to plant drugs in your house. I have a recording of him giving the order. Don't be there. Evelyn sprang into action, already dialing contacts. Then we'll let him walk straight into his own trap, she said, her voice tight with purpose. From outside, the block looked quiet, peaceful even. Investigators still loitered in unmarked cars, watching from a distance, believing the trap they'd set was ready to snap. But anyone who looked closely at the calm on David's face would know. This wasn't the resignation of a man defeated. It was the quiet confidence of someone who had turned his enemy's arrogance into a weapon of poetic justice. By 9:45 a.m., David sat inside a discreet surveillance van, parked 3 blocks from his apartment, eyes fixed on several laptop screens showing live feeds from inside his home. Overnight, Evelyn had coordinated a professional surveillance setup. Hidden cameras captured every angle, each with timestamps, GPS metadata, and high-fidelity audio. They're here, Evelyn whispered, pointing at one of the screens. 2 men in fake maintenance uniforms approached the back entrance. One lugged a toolbox far too heavy for a routine plumbing job. David adjusted his headphones. Through the directional mics, every word came through clearly. You're sure the guy's not home? One man asked as he worked the lock with practiced ease. Sterling said he'd be gone until noon, the other replied, pulling out 3 small plastic bags. We'll scatter these around. The kids' room, kitchen, under the bed. Make it obvious. David's hands curled into fists, but his breathing stayed steady. Chloe was safe, spending the morning at Evelyn's apartment with cartoons and snacks, blissfully unaware of what was unfolding in her home. At exactly 10:05 a.m., right on cue, Robert Sterling made his move. From a block number, he called the local police. I want to report a possible drug situation, he said, affecting a concerned tone. Apartment 17 on Maple Street. I believe there's a child at risk. But Sterling hadn't counted on one crucial variable, Evelyn Reed. Through her quiet network of legal allies, she had tipped off the Department of Internal Affairs the night before. A confidential alert had been issued, warning of a possible case of evidence planting involving a high-profile figure. When the officers arrived, they didn't just find the planted drugs. They found the 2 technicians still inside the apartment. They found the live security feed being transmitted in real time to civil rights attorneys. They found high-definition recordings of the entire break-in, from entry to placement of the drugs, along with crystal-clear audio of Sterling himself orchestrating the whole plan. Detective Davies called Sterling personally. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice laced with the icy calm of someone holding undeniable proof. "We need to talk. Right now." And in that instant, Sterling knew. Something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. "We need to talk. Now." Robert Sterling's instinctive response was to lean on the power he had always relied on. His name. "Detective, there must be some misunderstanding. I'm Robert Sterling of Sterling Holdings. I think it would be best if you speak to my attorneys." "Mr. Sterling," Detective Davies cut him off, "you're currently under formal investigation for conspiracy, evidence tampering, attempted framing of an innocent man, and several other charges that I'm sure your legal team can explain in detail. I suggest you come with us before that option is taken off the table." Across town, David watched it all unfold in real time. The empire that had tried to crush his family now being dismantled piece by piece. Evelyn stood nearby, tapping through her checklist on a tablet. "This went far beyond defense," she said, her voice steady. "The threatening calls were sent to the district attorney this morning. Sophia's financial records led us to 3 other victims. Identical tactics, identical outcomes. And the cherry on top?" She swiped to a new tab and smiled. "Channel 7, the Tribune, and the Washington Herald have all received the full story. By tonight, the world will know who Robert Sterling really is." At 6 p.m., David sat on his couch with Chloe beside him, watching live footage of Sterling being escorted from his corporate headquarters by federal agents. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. The man who had terrorized them for weeks now walked hunched, pale, and defeated, his arrogance shattered. David's phone rang. It was Sophia. Her voice cracked with emotion, but there was relief in it too. "David, I did it. I have 10 recordings. Calls where he brags about targeting people. Emails, transfers, everything." "Are you safe?" he asked, concerned. "I'm moving in with my aunt in Seattle. But I wanted you to know, those 2 weeks in your home, they were the first time I ever felt what a real family was like. Chloe's lucky to have you." That evening, David and Chloe prepared dinner together as the top story aired across every network. "Billionaire Robert Sterling indicted on federal conspiracy and civil rights charges," the anchor announced. "Exclusive documents show a decade-long pattern of intimidation against vulnerable families." Chloe turned to her father, brows furrowed. "Daddy, is that the man who is being mean to us?" David knelt beside her. "Yes, honey, but he can't hurt us or anyone else ever again." Chloe tilted her head. "How did you know it would all turn out okay?" David smiled, thinking of every sleepless night spent collecting evidence, of every threat endured, of every moment he kept quiet, waiting, watching. "Because, sweetheart," he said softly, "when bad people try to hurt good people, they usually end up destroying themselves." Chloe nodded with childlike certainty. "Next time, just help it happen a little faster." That night, after Chloe had fallen asleep, David got a call from Dr. Reed. "David," she said, breathless with awe, "do you understand what you've done? Sterling didn't just lose his company. The board removed him. His accounts are frozen. 3 more families are filing million-dollar lawsuits. You've started something big." David stood by the window staring out at the quiet street, the same one where all of this had begun, on a rainy night when he welcomed a frightened stranger into his home. 3 months later, that stranger's father was facing public disgrace, criminal charges, and the loss of everything he'd built through fear. But to David, the real triumph wasn't Sterling's fall. It was protecting Chloe, holding onto his dignity, and proving that justice isn't reserved for the powerful. It's won by those with courage, patience, and the will to say, enough. As Robert Sterling spent his first night behind bars, trying to understand how he had lost to a quiet, principled man from the suburbs, David kissed his daughter goodnight and began planning their next chapter. Because after a storm comes the rebuilding, and this time they would build stronger than ever. 6 months later, David Miller sat in his new office, a bright, expansive space filled with light, far removed from the modest apartment where the fight had begun. His desk overflowed with offers, speaking engagements, partnerships, invitations from universities across the country. Chloe, now 8, burst through the door holding the latest copy of the Tribune. Dad, look, it's in the paper again. The front page headline read, Nurse who took on a billionaire opens National Civil Rights Institute. She beamed with pride as David took the paper, gazing at the photo of the building now bearing his name, the David Miller Institute for Social Justice. Funded by the court settlement and donations from across the nation, it stood as a testament not only to his victory, but to the power of truth and the strength of a father who refused to back down. What began as a man defending his home and dignity had now become a national movement against corporate abuse of power. Dr. Reed is here, Chloe called out, pointing down the hallway as Evelyn approached with a thick stack of documents. Once just a lawyer in his corner, Evelyn was now David's partner at the Institute and a nationally recognized civil rights advocate, thanks to the Sterling case. David, she said, sitting down at the conference table with quiet satisfaction, we have an update on our friend. Robert Sterling, she explained, had been officially declared bankrupt the day before. The last of his assets had been seized and sold to pay restitution to the families he had targeted. David nodded, saying nothing. Over the past several months, he had watched quietly and methodically as Sterling's carefully curated world unraveled. First came the criminal conviction, 3 years in prison, then the civil suits, which drained every dollar from his accounts, and finally the public disgrace. Abandoned by his friends, disowned by his family, and erased from the circles he once ruled. He's still trying to reach me, Evelyn added, flipping through letters. That's the third one this month. He keeps offering names, claiming he has information on others like him, hoping to cut some kind of deal. David turned to the window, gazing out at the park where Chloe played every afternoon. Men like Sterling never understand what they've done, he said. They don't feel remorse, only regret for getting caught. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his office phone. It was an international number. Oxford University was offering him a visiting chair in social justice studies, recognizing his groundbreaking work in documenting systemic abuse and teaching individuals how to confront corruption. Are we moving to London? Chloe asked, overhearing part of the call. Just for a few months, David said with a smile, brushing her hair gently. So I can teach others how to stand up when powerful people try to push them down. Meanwhile, in a dim cell across town, Robert Sterling sat alone, surrounded by yellowed newspaper clippings chronicling his downfall. The headlines were brutal reminders of the man he had once been and the man the world now knew him to be. His legal team had dropped him. His wife had filed for divorce and changed her name. His children no longer returned his calls. And the billionaire, who once silenced others with money, now relied on the same state system he used to look down upon, sharing a cramped cell with a stranger who treated him with the same scorn he once showed to struggling families. That same afternoon, David welcomed an unexpected visitor. Sophia, now going by her mother's maiden name, Morrison, stood at the doors of the Institute. She had changed. Gone was the fragile girl who had shown up during a storm. In her place stood a poised young woman, radiating purpose. I needed to thank you in person, she said as they sat in the reception area, not just for protecting me, but for showing me that integrity still exists, that people still do what's right, even when it costs them everything. Sophia explained she had used what remained of her protected inheritance to establish a foundation for victims of corporate abuse. She was studying law now and planned to follow Evelyn's path. My father raised me to believe that people like you were beneath us, she said, tears glistening in her eyes. It took me 22 years to realize the only one beneath anyone was him and me, forever believing his lies. Just then, Chloe entered after school and froze when she saw Sophia. Emily, she squealed, racing over to hug her. To Chloe, Sophia would always be the kind woman who shared pancakes and Lego afternoons. David watched the reunion unfold with quiet emotion. That stormy night, the night he opened his home to a stranger, had sparked a series of events that reshaped not just his life, but countless others. That evening, after Sophia had left and Chloe had fallen asleep, David stayed late in his office reviewing Institute reports. In just 6 months, they had helped 43 families, secured over $8 million in damages, held 12 corrupt executives accountable. His phone rang again. It was a CNN reporter requesting an exclusive for a documentary on the Sterling scandal. He declined, not because he had anything to hide, but because the victory had never been about headlines. It was about Chloe, about dignity, about proving that justice doesn't belong to the wealthy or well-connected. It belongs to the ones who refuse to give up. That night, as David closed his eyes, he didn't think about Robert Sterling's prison cell, or the millions now flowing into his foundation, or the offers stacked on his desk from institutions across the globe. He thought about a stormy night, a frightened girl on the street, and a door he had chosen to open, not because he had to, but because it was right. That simple act of kindness became the foundation for everything that followed. David had come to understand something powerful. True revenge isn't destroying the people who tried to break you. It's building something so strong, so meaningful, so just, that their hatred becomes irrelevant. Robert Sterling tried to shatter a humble family. Instead, he ignited a movement that would protect thousands of others for years to come. Chloe slept peacefully down the hall, knowing her father was a man respected by the world. She would grow up believing that strength isn't measured by how much you have, but by how fiercely you stand for what's right, especially when the world assumes you can't. In the end, David discovered the greatest revenge of all: to build a life so full of purpose, so unshakable in truth, that those who tried to erase you become nothing more than a footnote in your story of triumph. And while Sterling faded into obscurity, every new family defended by the Institute stood as one more reminder that when courage, compassion, and wisdom come together, even the most corrupt power will fall. If this story of justice and resilience touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because in the real world, heroes aren't always loud, but they are always watching, always documenting, and always ready to stand.